So would you indulge me and help me celebrate the staff of both the Houston Public Library and the Houston Museum of African American Culture. John Guest Jr. is the unrelenting voice and architect behind the resurgence of the Houston Museum of African American Culture, which he was brought in to turn around in late 2009, and where he serves as CEO. He also serves as managing consultant of the Pinnacle Award-winning Guest Group Incorporated. He is a principal in the Quest Award-winning Dallas-based Access Seminars and Consulting Services, and managing director of Just Right Entertainment, which has produced 2 award-winning documentary films and co-produced a town hall meeting for the Congressional Black Caucus at the 2008 Democratic National Convention.
Pulitzer Prize winner Isabel Wilkerson is author of The Warmth of Other Suns, the New York Times bestseller that brings to life one of the epic stories of the 20th century through 3 unforgettable protagonists who made the decision of their lives during what came to be known as the Great Migration. Warmth won the 2010 National Book Critics Circle Award for Nonfiction, the 2011 Heartland Prize for Nonfiction, the 2011 Linton History Prize from Harvard and Columbia Universities, the 2011 Anisfield Wolf Award for Nonfiction, the 2011 Hillman Book Prize, the Stephen Ambrose Oral History Prize, the Independent Literary Award, and on and on and on. Warmth was named one of the 10 best books of the year by the New York Times Book Review, one of the 5 best books of the year by Amazon, and made the best of the year list of the New Yorker, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, the Economist, the Boston Globe, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and on and on. It made news around the world when President Obama chose Warmth for his summer reading on Martha's Vineyard in 2011. In 2012, the New York Times Magazine named Warmth to its list of the all-time best books of nonfiction. In early 2013, the New York Times Book Review declared that Warmth was published only 2 years ago, but it shows every indication of becoming a classic. And we all know that it is a classic. Isabel Wilkerson won the Pulitzer Prize for her work as Chicago Bureau Chief of the New York Times in 1994, making her the first Black woman in the history of American journalism to win a Pulitzer Prize and the first African American to win for individual reporting. She has also been named, in addition to winning the George Polk Award, a Guggenheim Fellowship, she's been named Journalist of the Year by the National Association of Black Journalists. I have to say that, in all honesty, my mother is in the house, and when people ask how did we get Isabel to come here, it was because my mother, when I was at a meeting of the National Association of Black Journalists, and my mother saw that Isabel was going to be there, she said, if you are really all of that, you need to get Isabel Wilkerson to come to Houston. And so I will tell you, I am in a job that's a startup job, and I have to debase myself, and Isabel will tell you, I went up to her and I said, my mama said. With no further ado, let me introduce our esteemed visitor, Isabel Wilkerson.
Well, John, you really are all of that. Thank you so much for inviting me and for making this happen. Thank you so much to HMAAC, to the Houston Public Library, and to all of you for coming out on this beautiful, beautiful day. You know, when you think about how beautiful this day is and how beautiful this city is, it's a reminder of how very determined and, in fact, heartbroken the people had to have been to leave a place as gorgeous as this. And I came to really, truly believe and recognize that in the course of working on this book. Let me show you, this is my copy of the book. You see me on television, there you get a chance to see it. Oh, thank you. Are you holding up yours? Thank you. So great. Thank you. You all look almost as beat up as mine. Thank you. This book, as you know, took me 15 years of searching for the people who would ultimately become the main characters of the book, casting call to find them, interviewing over 1,200 people, hearing their stories, the beauty of being able to sit at the knee of the elders and hear so many wonderful and inspiring stories of the wisdom and the strength that is the reason that we all are here today. Someone had to be very strong to bear up under the world that they were living under, whether they decided to stay or whether they decided to go. They had to be strong people. And so I had the joy and the honor of being able to do that. And so it took me 15 years of looking for them, finding them, and hearing their stories, and then going through the heartbreak of seeing some of them get ill and pass on. And so this took a very long time, took 15 years, and I like to say that if this book were a human being, it would be in high school and dating. That's how long it took. I didn't know it was going to take 15 years. I would never have taken 15 years to do anything, but I'm so glad and so feel so grateful that I had to do this. Now I want to get directly into the reason why we're here, because I find this to be not just one of the most underreported stories of the 20th century, how this major shift in our country's identity, in our country's demographics, in our country's history and culture. How could this have been missed, and what do we learn from it, and how can all of us, no matter where our families happen to have been in this great journey that occurred in our country, how do we all learn and grow from it? How do we gain strength from one of the most painful parts of our country's history? And those of you who have read the book, I think that you might agree with me. A lot of people say that it's a sad story. I find it empowering. I find it strengthening. Yeah. I find that it helps me to feel tall. I feel like I gained inches on my height from knowing the truth, because the truth had been held back for so long. And so I want to say a couple things about what this migration was. I'm going to give you a little distillation of what I've learned in the course of writing and talking about this book. I have, with this book, been all over the country. I've been from Anchorage, Alaska, to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I've been out of the country talking about this book. People want to hear these stories. There's this thirst for knowledge about the unwritten part of our history. And so a couple things I've come away with that I've learned since having worked on it that I didn't even realize when I had finished it. And one of them is that this book is putatively about the Great Migration. That's what it says that it's about, and that is in fact what what undergirds the story. But what it really is about is freedom, and how far people are willing to go to experience freedom. Freedom to be who they truly are within. Freedom to live out your God-given talents, and what to do once you get the opportunity to get that freedom. This story about these people who were part of this Great Migration, these were Southerners. These were Southerners who felt they had no other option but to leave the land of their birth, to go to places far, far away in order to be able to be free in the ways that they defined for themselves. This is the only time, think about this, this is the only time in our country's history that people who were citizens of this country, that American citizens had felt that they had no choice, either were forced to or had no other choice but to flee the land of their birth just to be recognized as the citizens to which they had been born. No other group of Americans has ever had to make that heartbreaking decision to go, or even just to have to even decide whether to go or whether not. No other group of Americans has had to leave the place of their birth and go someplace in their own country just to be recognized as citizens. They had to act like immigrants in order to be recognized as the citizens that they already have been. And so that's something that makes this singular in our country's history. At the same time, they, like almost any other group of people who have crossed the Atlantic, crossed the Pacific Ocean, crossed the Rio Grande, wanted the exact same things as anybody who's ever lived in this country before. And that's another aspect of this migration, another aspect of what it meant to be Southern during much of the part of the 20th century, and how people had to find a way out of no way to figure out how they were going to manage, and everybody had to make a decision. There was no right or wrong decision. Each family had to make a decision as to what was best for them at that time. And for those who left shouldn't have had to have left. They should not have been forced to leave. They should not have had to make that heartbreaking decision, and yet 6 million African American Southerners left this beautiful land and went to the frozen tundra. that is how desperate they felt that they were in order to find what they hoped would be freedom. Now, a couple of reasons, I'll give you a little sense just to remind ourselves of how this came to be. Now, there was this caste system in the South that ruled the days from the moment you woke up until the moment that you went to sleep, that there were things that you could and could not do, work that you could and could not seek. There were rules, regulations, protocols, and laws that controlled every single thing you did from the moment you woke up until the moment you went to sleep. These were the laws that we have come to realize now are often called Jim Crow, but actually was a caste system. I like to use the word caste system because it was a structure that was created to keep people in a fixed place. And this caste system was so arcane that it was actually against the law in Birmingham for a black person and a white person to merely play checkers together. You could go to prison if you were caught playing checkers with a person of another race. Now, what I'm describing to you is not ancient history. This is not about slavery, as those of you who've read the book know it. This is not about slavery. This is about the world that existed in the lifespan of the majority of adults alive today. Now, I've had the privilege and the honor of speaking all over the country, and I've been to every state in the South. And wherever I go, north, south, east, or west, I always find that my most challenging audiences have not to do with geography, but they happen to be, as we say in the South, bless their hearts, the high school students. Because they are so removed from all that I'm describing that they have a very hard time understanding how human beings would do this to other human beings. They just really resist the very idea of it. So I have a very hard time trying to make this come alive for them. And I found myself in Hawaii. I told you I've been all over with this book. And talking to high school students. I was, just so that you know, I went there to talk about the book. It was not a vacation. I went there to talk about the book. And it was a high school that wanted me to come out and talk about the book to their students. And they made arrangements for me to do that. And it was January, so of course I was going to say yes. And anyway, I found myself talking with these high school students, and I was having a really difficult time, and I was trying to figure out what example from the book could I somehow summon up in order to get through to them. And so I thought of this one, but before I tell you what it was, I'd like to see if I might get a show of hands from those of you who might have done the following within the last 6 months. Now, when I'm in New York City, I give them a year. That might be a clue as to what this is about. It's not illegal, just so you know, it's not illegal. I would never ask anyone to raise their hand about that. But I wondered if you might be willing to raise your hand if you can recall having done the following within the last 6 months. How many of you found yourself driving your car, so you need to see why Manhattan gets a year on this one. Have you found yourself driving your car, you're driving your car, and you see that you're about to overtake a car in front of you because it is going more slowly than you are. And so you do the wise and safe thing, which would be to pass that person on the road. How many of you have been driving in the last 6 months and found yourself passing another car on the road? That's the question. Exactly. Now, I see a couple hands that didn't go up, and I would say you do not drive. Because it's impossible to be driving and not passing somebody on the road. It's a safe and wise thing to do. In fact, you probably did it on the way here. I've been on the highways here, and I know. I probably did it on the way here. And so it is the most natural, and it is a matter of just what is the safe and wise thing to do. It's just second nature. And yet, had you been African American in many parts of the South, and particularly the more rural areas are more likely this would be enforced. But if you were anywhere in the South throughout much of the 20th century into the 1970s, in certain isolated precincts of the South, believe it or not, it was against the law for a black motorist to pass a white motorist on the road, no matter how slowly that person was going. Wow. Yeah, and that's what the students said too. They said that too. And so this is something that you can think about how that tests the sense of self-control and the sense of propriety for almost any driver, because it's the most natural thing in the world and it's the safest thing to do. So you can imagine how difficult that would be to live in a world where you could not do something as similar as that. And to remind you of actually, to let you know how very real this was, as I've gone out and spoken, particularly when there are elders in the audience, I will often have testimony about additional things. I was told in one place in New Jersey, the man said, well, tell them about the four-way stop signs. I said, well, wow, the four-way stop signs too. There was a code of the road specifically for African-American motorists. So anyway, I told this to the students in Hawaii, and they did not take kindly to that. They were not liking that, because driving, they're 16, they just got their driver's permit, and they don't like the sound of any limits on them when it comes to driving. And so when I told them that got their attention. And basically the whole room just erupted into discussion, and I basically lost control of that classroom. And at a certain point, I asked one of the students what he was saying, and a student raised his hand and he said, well, I would have honked. And I said, let me start again. If you could not pass the people on the road, you couldn't honk to make them go faster. You couldn't do that. That was not allowed. And so they talked among themselves again. Another one raised his hand. He said, well, I would have tailgated. I wouldn't have made any noise, but I would have tailgated to let them know they need to move faster. And I said, if you could not pass them on the road and you couldn't honk to make them go faster, you couldn't tailgate either. In other words, you had to stay in your place. That's what it means to be in a caste system, an artificial hierarchy in which everything that one does from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep is based upon what they look like. And therefore, you could not have done that either. And so they talked among themselves and talked among themselves again. And remember that Hawaii is a place that's filled with people who migrated to get to that one island in the middle of the ocean. And so another student said, well, I would have left then. And I said, well, that is what 6 million people chose to do during the Great Migration. That's basically the definition of the Great Migration. And so that's how they finally came to an understanding of what was at stake. And how there were not the options that we might imagine ourselves now because of how things have changed so much.